Hello and welcome to CMON Expo. Thank you guys so much for joining us here for the Song of Ice and Fire panel. We are very excited to have you all. We'll keep it a little tight today, so if you have questions, we're a smaller group, so feel free to raise your hands, as things kind of come to mind. So that way we can kind of get as many questions answered as we can. I do also have the Facebook and Twitter feeds up. So if you prefer to ask your questions there, I will be watching. And I think that's all the details you need. Yeah. All right. Awesome. So is everyone in here familiar with the Song of Ice and Fire miniature game? Yes. Okay. Show of hands. Show of hands. Okay. Yeah.
Not him.
I just wanted to know just before we just kind of like jump right in. So has everyone here seen the announcement earlier? Yes. I think there's some folks that didn't. So Michael, do you want to quickly
just
briefly
do this.
Recap? I think that's fair. That's the announcement. That's all you get.
So to recap our big spoiler announcements we had yesterday, we had unit updates that we released, and then we talked about some little minor topics such as the Baratheons and the Targaryens, and that was it. No, okay. So we did answer the year-long strewn-out question of will there be dragons? The answer was yes. The Targaryens and the Baratheons were both announced as our 5th and 6th technical factions being released for the game that will be out for the end of the year. The Baratheons featuring the forces of Stannis and Renly, and the Targaryens featuring, of course, Daenerys Targaryens, with an initial release focus on the Dothraki hordes with Khal Drogo, which we have that recorded, and we have posts up there on the official CMON and the Song of Ice and Fire Facebook pages, so you can go and check those out and get full recaps of all the spoilers that we released for those yesterday.
Wonderful, wonderful. So you're saying there's no spoilers that you're releasing today?
I am not a fan of spoilers, and we did a lot of that yesterday, and it was just taxing on the soul.
Fair enough, fair enough.
I, on the other hand, love spoilers.
Yeah.
All right. So this is mostly an audience-fed panel. So if anyone has some questions right off the bat, go ahead and raise your hands. All right.
I'm gonna ask Eric the question.
Okay.
Oh, we're gonna play favorites now. All right, right off the bat.
Okay, so Michael mentioned on a podcast about 6 months or so ago that there were 9 planned factions. I also noticed that he made a distinction that the Targaryens and the Baratheons would make 6. So it sounds like he was excluding potentially the neutrals. With that being said, and the popularity of the game rising, do we still think there's going to be 9 factions, or potentially would there be room for more?
To be fair, the actual statement I said is that we had
He's editing the question.
We had at the is that we had at the time have developed upwards of 9 factions.
Yeah, that sounds like something you would say.
Yes, very technical and very methodical.
Right. And
which then the internet twists into a different statement entirely.
Well, that's
internet.
Welcome to the internet. I mean, he's right. There are development plans for. I'm even going to be more vague than Michael. So I apologize for the disappointment, but there are development plans for various number of factions. We've all read the books, right? Have we all read the books?
There's a book series.
Oh, they're pretty good. That's actually good. Did you watch the show? And perfect. So even if you watch the show, definitely read the books. It's the same story, but it's a really different experience. And George R. R. Martin is awesome. Oh yeah, it's not even live. Like
no.
George,
he was.
Imagine George.
He won't be less awesome in a few hours when it's out.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Well, imagine George that we were actually on the internet on my finger guns at the camera. You are awesome.
Actually, I think it's that camera.
Finger guns. We even have Jon Snow in the audience here, which is like it's.
We do.
It's super. It is super awesome. So, the reason of the books talk a lot about greater houses and lesser houses, and they're especially those of you guys who follow the genealogy of all the characters in the series. You know how much room for expansion there is. we also know how much room for expansion there is. We are developers who know the source material very well, and that's all you're going to get from us.
I wanted to see those elephants.
All right. Next question.
Nobody's going to ask me
over
any
here.
more
Alright.
spoiler questions.
I think you kind of answered it already, but question was like for example, for the Lannisters and for Lannisters, Starks, and all that stuff. You got Tully, you got Clegane, and with your announcement with Baratheons, we're getting Highgarden's crew. Was there any more? Yes or no? If it's a spoiler. Was there any idea of expanding more on like the neutral factions? I know we have House Bolton, but was there any idea of expanding into some maybe other neutral minor houses?
Dude, we literally covered that yesterday in like the spoiler panel. There was a whole slide on it.
No, but you know what's great though? But not everybody here was at that
I
panel.
know,
So why
but,
don't
but now they're making me recap it, and I'm having to bring back those wounds about talking about spoilers again.
so this is a question
That was methodical
for,
to hurt me.
I love
Okay.
you, man. You like. we're going to find a way to get you something at the end of the show.
We get to respond with also the phrase I haven't been able to say in a while of, if it's in the books, it can be in the game. But to recap yesterday, we did talk about the Neutral Heroes Box 2, which featured guys such as Walder Frey, and actually I'll give you one more spoiler, because there's another character that I completely omitted talking about, but is on the cover of the box, and for the last 24 hours Darren has been discussing who it could be, and it is Tycho Nestaris from the Iron Bank. That is the missing character on there, and so yes, that is the last character that's in that box. But we also talked about Vargo Holt and the Bloody Murmur / Brave Companions as well. And you know, again, I still want to see those elephants, but we'll see. That's so far in the future if it happens. But there we go. Spoiler talk already. Cool.
I know. we already got one out of you. Fantastic.
Everybody gets one.
I'm gonna keep a tally. Everyone gets one.
Please direct
No.
all spoiler questions. Please direct all spoiler questions to Michael Shinall.
Yeah,
I'm gonna keep it. I have a question for you. For each of you, what is your favorite released or announced but not yet released set so far to play?
Wow. I'm gonna. My favorite. These questions. What is your favorite?
Wow.
I mean, I'm gonna say. I'm going to give you the lame answer. My lame answer is the core box. The reason it is because I played the core box more than any other set by necessity. Like though the game is a co-design between Michael and myself after the core box, the factions after the core box were like greatly, vastly, mostly Michael and also Fabio Curry. Now I'm still keep tabs on the game. I still enjoy the game. I love the game. But I'm not nearly as far ahead in development as they are, and there exists no single expansion in this game that I have played as much as the core box. And in our one public playing of the core box, I crushed this guy, and I was pretty happy about it.
I don't recall that actually being the case, but you know, revisionist history that all you want. That's fine.
Internet,
if it makes you feel better,
help me out.
yes, because
It's on camera.
You can put it in the YouTube link comments below.
we're setting a tone for this little chat here that I'm not liking
So-
the direction that we're going in.
The reason why, by the way, like
Are you sure you don't feel the fire?
the reason I'm so happy about crushing him like this once is because I'm not really good at games, right? Like there's this misconception that designers are amazing at their games. Like Michael's actually pretty darn good at Game of Thrones. At Song of Ice and Fire, I always do that. I'm pretty famously bad at games I play because I am unable. When playing in a semi-competitive setting, I'm unable to divorce designer brain from play brain. Designer brain specifically is focused on: is everybody having fun? Why are we not having fun? Which is a terrible mindset to be in when you're competitive. When you're competitive, you don't care if your opponent's having fun. You just want to crush them and exploit as much of the game as you can. So I'm like, oh well, I'm not sure if this goes with the spirit of what we're trying to do. Like, no, maybe we won't have as much fun. So, and of course, I love to explore every little piece of it. And we generally make fairly cool, complex combinatorial games. So I love exploring that. And exploration in the middle of gaming is not always the best way to win games.
What happens if I do this? Oh, I lose. All right, cool.
That was like, how many turns did that take me to lose though? Like that's kind of exciting. Did I have fun losing? Right.
I lost really efficiently there.
Those are the kinds of questions we like to ask. So when I win, especially when I win in a competitive setting, I remember that, and I think it's really cool, and I get to be all like, "Oh, I crushed you, raw."
For me, so House Bolton is going to be, to
I
the shock
knew.
of knowing my favorite little group in the game. The Flademen are some of my favorite miniatures out there. I personally don't play them a lot because for me it's a big points investment, just not my play style. But again, you're not making units just for us. We're making it for all different play styles out there. The Bastards girls I like a lot because the idea of we're going to shoot these guys and cripple them with arrows, then release the hounds onto them. But that's probably my favorite unit in the game, also from a mechanical standpoint, just because they kind of cover all bases and they're a nice little ranged attack and melee attack in there. My favorite character in the setting is actually going to be Barristan Selmy, in a weird kind of switch over there. I just like the old grizzled knight guy. To me, he's like the Clint Eastwood of the setting. But my favorite version of him is actually the one that appears in the Targaryen faction, which I talked about yesterday, so that's not even a spoiler today, so I don't feel bad about it. But man, he's really cool, and the model is just like one of my favorites ever. And you guys will see that, in the future. You guys can wait.
I saw a design version of him. I don't know if that passed through development or not, but the design version looked OP.
That's probably it. Yeah. No, favorite character, just make him more powerful. They should be, right? That's how it works.
Right. I can't blame you. He's one of my in the books. He was one of my favorite characters.
Yes. Other mediums, maybe not so much, but hey, that's all right.
Do you have any other key or favorite characters from the books that you were able to bring out? Eric mentioned one of his.
We can talk about the minor characters we got to bring up and everything. Like Jarl, the one that suspiciously looks like Eric Lang, which I take no small amount of joy in, killing every single time he appears across the table. Just if you ever play against me, the quickest way to get me to make a bad play is just deploy that model somewhere and just put him in a bad spot because it's.
And curiously, he's really easy to kill.
Weird.
Which set was that? All right. Question from the audience.
So I have one question. My disclaimer is that this is not my question, but I would like it answered for other people who've asked it. And then I have one tiny plea. Some people have stated that you guys potentially would create units for primarily thematic reasons without balancing them competitively. Is that true or false?
I'm going to take this one because I know exactly what he's referencing. So the internet has a very fun habit of judging things before they're actually even released or played. And I'm going to cite a very specific example of with the Night's Watch, the Scorpion. When it was announced and released, everyone was like, why would I take this? It's garbage. And now it is almost a staple unit taken in most every single Night's Watch list. And so it seems to be there's this weird ebb and flow, almost like the internet functions on negativity, that they go, oh man, this is garbage or overpowered, seemingly without actually having played it. And then they'll play it, and all of a sudden things will change or data will actually come to surface. It's weird like that.
Actually, but however, he touches on a broad design point that I love talking about because we talk. So Michael's designed a ton of. Between Michael and I, we've done how many collectible collectible or customizable games? You did Wrath the King's Dark Age.
Wrath the King's Dark Age, Rumbos technically, because it's got 100 and something heroes in there.
Fire. So I think we've done CCGs. 9 customizable games between us, right? So we talk a lot about philosophically about designing games. One of the things that I personally love is when I love units. In this case, units could be cards or anything, but I love units that look much different on a power level scale than they actually play, because the part of the joy of playing these games is the discovery process of, oh my god, this reads way crazy overpowered. And then you play it and you find out it's not actually as bad as you think, or you play somebody that's really bad and they're not as good as you think. If every unit played had a either power level or or a particular synergy or combo had exactly the power level you expected it would be, that's not really that much of a journey, right? Sometimes we do it because we're like, all right, this, like, we don't want everything to be a mystery. We want some things to be obvious and cool. But we really, really, really enjoy when people, well, I enjoy it. I know Michael reads the internet more than I do, but it's like, we enjoy when people make that journey of being surprised and having their expectations subverted. And in a lot of cases, we're not perfect by any stretch, but in a lot of cases, that is absolutely and purposely built into development. Like, so sometimes because I'm not that connected to the power level of the game, like 7 expansions from now, which even you guys haven't seen, like I will sometimes look at a card that Curry shows us. I'll be like, I'll just give him the sniff test, right? Like, oh, that seems really strong. Is that as strong as I think it is? No, great.
Well, that's a thing as well of, players, and especially the internet, they like to go extremes. Nothing can ever just be, it's okay. It's either this is the greatest thing ever, or why would you ever take this, and set much more expletives and things we can't say on camera because we're civilized. So,
And my quick plea, if I can, I know this was mentioned yesterday, but I'm just going to put my card in the bucket here. For those of us who are completionists and who really enjoy having all the physical cards, again, I just want to ask if there is a possibility that you guys would consider making cards for the updated, for example, like the 6 that were updated yesterday.
oh, again, we are exploring all routes, cater to as many people as we can, and if there's enough demand and it is feasible for us to do, we'll always explore options. We don't like saying no just for the sake of saying no.
I'll add my way to that. I hate printed.
Suggestion, game night kits. Wait, give it out to us.
Oh, by including them in the
Yep.
game night kits.
It's a lot of cards and a lot of hats.
Yeah.
A gentleman way in the back there.
Oh, in the back.
Hi.
Away from the future and to go to the past a little bit. I'm interested in the design process. I wonder if you could maybe identify the sort of stages that this game went through from conception to reality.
Oh yeah.
Ooh, fun.
Juicy. How much time do we have?
Yeah, plenty.
Oh, we're not streaming.
We're not streaming, so we can just go.
Lock the doors.
I mean, we talked a bit about this last year, but we can go way back. We can go way back in the time machine. I'm going to tell a bit from my perspective because I joined the game already in progress. So even before I joined CMON as an employee, I've been working with CMON. Come on, Eric. I've been working. This is a tough transition. I've been working with CMON as a freelancer for many years, like since 2012, I think it is. We've always been kind of tight in talking about games. And I heard that CMON was working on a Song of Ice and Fire miniature game. I was like, that's pretty cool. Good luck with that. I read the books a lot. Go for it. They said we're gonna put Michael on. I'm like, all right, it's good. I'll play it when it comes out. Then right around the period when I was about to join CMON, we had I looked at the game, I played the game, I was like, it was already good, and was not that far off what you see now. I did what I always do, and I was like, what if we could put in some what if we can put in some I was going to say something, but what if we can put in some sizzle, like some like particular types of sizzle, and I did what Michael loves me for, and just poked every aspect of the game. Like, we've tried this, we tried this, we tried this, we tried this, and we tried putting some more kind of board game like elements into it. We poked them a lot, and Michael will give you his reaction to it, but to me,
like the little kid tugging at the.
So So the thing that I think the biggest thing that I wanted to add to the game was to make sure that the political side of Song of Ice and Fire, the series, was more present in the game, because you can't have the series without having the political element. And it was also a really cool use for the non-combat characters, and it tended to gel with the rest of the game. And we started talking about how we wanted to use the house cards a little bit more, and do away with as much of the rule book, with the standard rule book facing question mechanics that you find in a lot of classical miniature games.
So that was one of the mandates from like early on, was just that didn't want to just. It's been very easy just to make another miniature war game,
right?
And didn't want to do that.
Right, exactly right. And so the philosophy behind the tactics deck, right, was to take all of the normal exceptions-based gameplay that you would get in a more complicated game and just say, what if instead of the exceptions corner cases always applying, they only apply when you have the right tactics cards for it. So we just cut out the need for this giant book and just whatever I got in my hand, whatever you got in your hand applies now, and if you don't have it, it doesn't apply. It's a bit of a, for tabletop gamers, it's not the cards in hand with special effects. It's not a radically new concept, but for miniature gamers, it's kind of new. Right? It's not something that classical miniature gamers are used to. There's card play in other games, but not the way that we did with our tactics deck. So it was very enjoyable to kind of without beating our chests and trying to be innovative for the sake of it. We just wanted to sort of make a game that was more accessible to the wider tabletop market than the miniature game market, because Ice and Fire is such a transcendent IP itself, right? It's a New York Times bestseller for a reason. It appeals to so many different types of people. We want the board game to be the board game. See, I even said it. We want the miniature game to be that.
So the big thing was, I remember when we first got Jim Ludwig from Dark Sword, who is we team up with Dark Sword, who has the license rights to the miniature game that we go through, and then through George Martin and them. When we first got him out there to check out things, we showed him our credentials of making other miniature games and basically what they wanted to see in this game. And I remember the initial set of things was, George wants to see a game with, quote, hundreds of miniatures and a bunch of banners. It's like, okay, well, let's compromise here a bit, because while I get the whole let's recreate having 1,000 miniatures on the table style game, we have a certain design/cost limitations of, not packaging 1,000 miniatures in a box.
Right. And honestly, game length considerations too, right? Like
sure.
Who wants to play a game that is 5 hours?
5 hours. Okay.
I do.
The good thing is, George is, he's an old style D&D player and has, miniatures upon miniatures upon miniatures. So that's what he got super excited about, was the whole diorama aspect of things.
Right. It looks epic.
Yes. And then it was a matter of okay, so yeah, this is what you want. Let's scale this to a level that we can actually feasibly do and still do all this justice. I think one of the biggest transitions that's happened since we started the project versus where we are now is initially every single thing had to have some source reference in the book. So, and I've said this time before, but okay, say we're going to do one unit of and I'm going to say this, and I said this in the past, and people immediately jumped and went confirmed, which is not the case. But Karstark Spearmen are referenced in one line in Storm of Swords as the Karstark Spearmen were on the vanguard flank with their giant tower shields with a Suncrest logo. We would have to find the line of text that references this thing as being something that exists in the setting, and okay, now we can use it. Versus time went on, where now it's, okay, does this seem like something that can now fit in the setting realistically? Because, for example, we're talking about the newer factions, Baratheons. Okay, we have a lot of kind of artistical choices in there, the Stag Knights, who are very insanely cool looking, antler helmets and giant warhammers, just like, Robert's design there from back when he was, so strong. That's not a thing that's in the books, though, but it is something that absolutely could exist in the setting. So that gets passed on from a design standpoint. It goes to, George and them, and they go okay, that seems like something that could exist. We approve it, and yeah, that's really cool. And
plus, Stag Knights is the best name ever.
So it's
sounds like a frat party a little bit.
Yeah.
It works on many levels, man.
Yep, multi-leveled. So that type of transition from going to meticulously researching everything to find okay, this is referenced in one specific section here, here, and here, versus now, okay, do you think this is cool? This is something that can exist? Yes? Okay, and then now it can enter the design process. And of course, all the artwork, all of the units, everything is still approved through there. So, and I learned very quickly over a couple of years and so that he has a thing for pauldrons and shields are the things that will absolutely I'm going to say trigger because that's not a thing, but shields always get the most pushback on this guy needs to be using this type of shield or this would get him killed. And actually, because we have Jon Snow in the audience here, I keep seeing Longclaw. That was actually one of those minor little things that came up was the art rendition we did of Longclaw had the wolf's head shaped like this and like the growl. And that was specifically called out because it was that'll get you killed because if it's anything but straight, if it's curved, it'll snag on the cloak or something, and then when he tries to draw it, he'll just get cut down. So we had to redo Longclaw. That little minor bit of detail is the things that would get caught. So
that definitely sounds like George. God, I love them.
It also comes to play in the scaling of the minis as well, right? You have to have the mountain as tall as a guy on a horse, and
the average height in
the mountain.
The average height in Westeros is 6'4", by the way. But yes, so everything is specifically when it comes to the characters, everything was meticulous. I've done the Arya Stark horse nose comment a while, but the heights were very meticulous as well because Robb Stark is 6 foot 3.5. Jaime Lannister is 6'5.3". These are have to be that specific scale. Meanwhile, you have the Mountain, who is nearly 2 meters tall. And actually, turns out that we found out when we were doing the scaling stuff that Hodor would be, aside from the Mountain, I believe the tallest person in Westeros.
That's right.
Which but it was a matter of getting that scale there because he's a really tall guy and might have giant's blood, but we didn't realize exactly how tall.
Right, and they were never really
right. It's never specific
side by side,
in there,
right? Yeah,
because it just mentioned he's really, really tall, and then we find out he's nearly the Mountain tall. So those are things we kind of find out, those little behind-the-scenes things when we're sending in models for corrections or scaling or things.
There's still a part of me that feels like all of our scaling was kind of centered around the mountain anyway. How do we make the mountain this size
Mountain
and everything else
and
is
Tyrion.
Yeah.
Right.
Actually, a side story. With Sandor Clegane, the side of his face that is scarred.
Right.
When we did posted on the Kickstarter, we had a group of people that went you guys messed up and did it on the wrong side. And that's not the case, because we actually had a specific approvals conversation with that. Because apparently what this stemmed from is that in the books, there's 3 times where they're talking about his facial scarring, but it's all from different characters' perspectives, and it's never specified what angle they're looking at him from. And so it kind of is vague or flip-flops. But we had, when we did the miniature, we actually originally started on the other side, and they corrected it to the side that we're doing it on. So I guess that answered that internet
Can't
question.
argue with George.
But of course, the internet can.
Well, yeah, sure. Right. George, you don't know your own books very well. There you go.
So those fun little things that happen during approvals,
Question in the gray shirt.
So that's another fun story about there as well, is that the certain other mediums that may or may not be visual really put a big emphasis on the fact that he says he never uses shields, when in the books it's talked about he prefers not using shields, but it's never said he's never going to use them. And actually the original Dark Sword miniature release one has him using a shield, and that one was specifically as Jim told me, so if this is different, by the way, to George or anyone watching, this is what Jim Ludwig told me, is that that miniature specifically went through extra scrutinization through George, and he never had a problem with there. Now, we did change the sculpt that's coming in the neutral box, because the Kickstarter sculpts were exclusive. We were doing alternate sculpts for the retail release. We did change it so he is not using a shield. That was just an artistic choice, and may or may not have been because a bunch of people were, sending us constant emails about shields. But we just wanted it to be different and cool.
Over here in the back, and then we'll get you next.
Did George approve his own figures?
Well, he did approve it, but that was actually a surprise that we sent in, having that. But, of course, how do you dislike a figure based on yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't in that loop, but I have a feeling he was probably the most lenient on that one. It's it's only real life. It's not in the theater of my mind.
Can you make
right?
the shoulders a little broader and make the muscles a little more defined?
George is George is an amazing guy, and he famously lives in his head, right? So like I could imagine that he imagines Westeros more vividly than the real world, right? As he just he's got such a great mind for it, so it wouldn't surprise me. It's just like, oh yeah, sure, looks like me.
Yes.
So another question again, getting to questions about, I guess, the competitive scene. So we've seen changes to attachments. Are there possibilities? Assuming there probably are, but I'm just curious about how far you guys are willing to go. Obviously, potentially to units being changed, and then potentially even commanders and their tactics cards, or even the larger tactics deck as a whole.
So
For
as
the
we-
game.
So as we talked about in yesterday with the whole balancing thing, the only reason that the units were updated that they were is because they were not seeing play. And we want everything to see play because you have something cool we want to be done. Luckily, we haven't encountered anything that has been like, oh my god, this is grossly overpowered, and that situation has not come up. Thanks to our nice developers who should be watching this, Fabio Curry and all the rest of the development team there.
And Leo Almeida. We didn't
And
forget
little
you.
Leo. Got some cool stuff for you coming up. So, we do keep a monitor on the competitive scene and things like that. And if the situation did arrive where it's like, oh my god, what were we thinking? This thing is just completely overpowered and is dominating, then yes, that will be addressed because we don't want people to have negative experiences. But this is more of an effort to, it's always easier to make something better than to nerf something. And luckily, again, we haven't had to do that. The only things we've done is like, okay, these guys aren't being taken. Even some of those changes were just more quality of life because they just were a little clunky in how they worked, or they just were on that cusp of being okay. But changes are not something we take lightly. They're not something we want to do that much. And we had a long, serious internal conversation about even doing this before we actually implemented it. But we figured for the better life of the game and for the player base, you'd rather use the stuff that you want to use because it's cool and have it just be able to be used, rather than just like, oh, okay, someone's going to take that because they're a diehard fan of it, but that's, they're just taking it as a joke. We don't want to have anything like that.
Do we have a question over here? Oh, sorry. In the back.
So I can't... We can give some specifics there, but there's some things we really can't say. But it's actually a weekly thing that that it goes through. We're constantly developing stuff. Like it's and we're working on a year plus ahead of anything. But it goes from initial concepts to like, okay, here's what we're thinking about making. That goes through a set of approvals. Then we get the rough sketch made. Okay, that goes through approvals. And then we get a finalized, sketch done, an art piece, and then we go into actually doing the miniatures at that point. And everything in there will have some kind of little micro approval that will go through. And sometimes it is going to be a thing like, okay, and again, it's more so on the characters because the units, our art team that we have is fantastic about just making. We usually give them a rough description of like, this is the feel of the unit, these are the armaments that we want to see, and then we just let them do their thing because they've been on this project for so long and they're such diehard fans themselves that anything, almost giving them any type of description is going to limit something cool that they're just going to turn back from us by themselves. So,
Right.
With the Stag Knights, we went like, okay, these are going to be followers of, of the Baratheons. They should feel a theme of following Robert. We kind of want them to maybe have antler helmets, and then their weapons are going to be warhammers. And then that's really, even that is a lot of description compared to just letting them go and going like, okay, this is going to have like a spiked buckler, a mace, and they should look grizzled. And they
Right.
belong to this faction. And then usually they'll turn out something that's like 10 times better than you could even imagine in your head.
Right. Oh, because there's a lot of logistics to making a miniature besides even the details we give them, right? Like posing is such a big part of it, right? Posing and gravity, right? Like the best. We have some of the best sculptors in the world, right? But the reason I do that is because they really push that boundary of how can you make the most dynamic possible pose that does not defy gravity.
And is manufacturable as well.
And is
Yep.
manufacturable in those smallest number of pieces, right? So generally speaking, I mean, we don't know. I mean, we know those are the parameters, but we don't know anything about how to do that. So the less the less specific direction we give them, the more they're just able to blow our minds, right? And that works with artists too, right? Even not even for Song of Ice, for all of our games.
Yeah.
Like our artists are so amazing. We give them inspiration. I especially with Adrian Smith, I write him a mixtape. Like here's a cool band I picked up. Listen to this, and they just turn out amazing stuff.
Cool. All right, next question over here. All right.
Uh, 100% integral as far as changing the tactics board, something that could potentially exist in the future, but no current plans at this time.
Activation banners for the Boltons. People want those. The neutral ones are nice, but they want the Boltons.
Bolton's not a faction. Neutral is a faction.
Siege machines. People are also very keen on these, like free falls, things like that. Once you hear in the book, is that a Night's Watch only type of deal, or is this going to be expanded into other factions in the future?
Spoilers. Next question.
What kind of factors go into deciding which factions or so which unit boxes are created next? Is that part of an overall plan, or is that to do with timing in terms of approvals? How do you actually decide which product comes out at which time?
That is not a rapid fire question by any means.
Nope.
So well, we can answer, but
Yep.
but we got to pause. Do you want to ask that at the end with some other rapid fires? All right. That's right. We develop questions too.
Quid pro quo.
People are asking about supplements to campaigns. It's very, very popular. People want to sort of live more within the world and actually experience the literature of the game itself. I know you touched on yesterday, maybe a few plans to do that based on the community. But is that something that CMON will be doing in the future, or will the community be responsible for creating content like that?
So we actually have made some narrative scenarios. Anything beyond that answer would verge into spoiler territory. I'm going to enjoy this.
I'm gonna give him a little bit more of that. I'll get.
All right, good cop, bad cop, it, whatever.
I'm your Huckleberry. I'm your Huckleberry. So yes, we're absolutely thinking about that. We actually from day one. Now I want to be super clear, right? I'm not talking about community created content. We're not crowdsourcing anything, but we of course narrative content is something from the beginning we've been thinking about forever, and it absolutely is in here. That is me pointing at our noggin.
Given the standard of miniatures, people are really big fans of the work that's happened. What the game is right now is obviously a sort of a tabletop war game, but people are thinking about maybe using skirmish rules. Some people are doing that independently using other game systems. Are there plans to create a skirmish version of the game?
I'll take this. Spoilers. Next question.
So
I think there's two or three more. The Night's Watch is a big one.
it's too fast.
With the Night's Watch at the moment, there seems to be
Maybe you can try to reiterate the question a little bit in the answer.
playing with the Night's Watch is a very powerful faction. Things like card draw potentially cause issues for people where they have a lot of cards in their hand and it reduces their the opponent's ability to deal counter with the cards that they have. If you were to look at that in isolation and then with other factions itself, do you think that potentially that could be changed in the future to not allow so much variation for one faction, given they are already an elite faction? To have that many choices does make it very difficult to counter that kind of thing with
So that question is going to basically break down into people are concerned with how a faction plays initially and are asking if we are going to change that faction because they don't like how that faction plays initially. The answer to that is no, which I will also go back to cite on that case perceptions versus realities and data points coming out, because Simon, since I know this is you for the unofficial Facebook page here and everything, you'll know that things go through cycles of this is the most powerful thing at this time, and now this is the most underpowered thing at this time. And I'll even cite a real-world example of people saying that the Free Folk were drastically underpowered, meanwhile they're the army that swept Adepticon's tournament.
Next question then is, I guess
go back and maybe create more variations for different troop types? So, for instance, there might be more alternate sworn sword figures to add to your collection.
So usually I wouldn't answer a question like that, but I actually can because it's going to become fairly apparent. With our newer...
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. Because it's already happened. It's just I don't know if anyone's noticed. With our newer unit releases,
yeah.
we actually have, there were originally 3 sculpts and a bannerman for each tray, and the bannerman was an arm swap of an existing guy. We have actually moved that to now being 4 unique sculpts and a bannerman sculpt for each unit as well. So you actually, that has happened with the newer releases, but is continuing moving forward to give you a little bit more diversity in what's there. And that actually, I guess we can talk about this a little bit. That is a change based from one of the initial design things about the game and the manufacturing process that changed through the game's development. Originally, the game was going to be a sprue-based thing where you would get the miniatures and parts and assemble them yourselves, and so everything was very formulaic. That like, okay, here's your X number of torsos, here's your X number of arms, and so you'll see with some of the initial wave releases, that's how, if you look at the miniatures, that's how they're designed. And that's where, you know, the newer ones are a little bit more dynamic because then we decided we were going to make them all pre-assembled and change how they were manufactured together. So the poses were able to become more dynamic and more kind of characterful because, okay, this guy who's like up in this pose like this, he's always going to be like that. We don't need to make this arm interchangeable with another arm. So that's something that changed as well. Now, as far as relooking or resculpting existing things, that's one of those things that's never off the table, but can't confirm or deny or give anything at this point. So the internet's going to go affirm, you know, confirmed resculpts, but nothing is off the table, but can't confirm or deny that's anything we are looking at this time.
Okay.
Just clarify to the internet, hashtag never means never say never does not mean yes.
I mean, we can say that as much as we want, but you know, that literally 5 minutes from now it's, oh no, this is not live stream, so 10 minutes from
It is live, isn't it?
No, we're recording.
Oh.
Well, unofficial Facebook group is right there, so I'm sure that's the
Take that, internet.
Okay. So there's only a couple more.
Yeah, 2 more, Simon.
Okay, make them good. With the rebalancing that has happened recently, what kind of tempo do you anticipate this happening on? Because obviously people want to know if there were new cards coming, etc. The 1.4 has just dropped. When do you see 1.5 happening? And then people have started talking about version 2.0 for some unknown reason because they've noticed the version number creep up, and 2.0 obviously could be construed as being a new version. Could you sort of...
So we label things 1.1, 1.2 because whenever we make changes, we have to make a new version history. But that's not like we're ticking up toward a 2.0.
Right.
The game just came out, and honestly, like the changes from 1.1 to 1.3 to 1.4, there were no significant rules changes. In most of those, it was just clarifying existing rules to be better worded. But anytime we do that, it has to be a new version because we can't go, this is 1.1a, this is 1.1b. But as far as actual like updating cards and errata, as little as we possibly can. And that's why we started with the Starks and Lannisters to give that kind of look. And you'll notice that we only updated one single Stark card, period, because it was the only one that was not seeing play. So in an ideal world, that doesn't happen. Like, we don't have to do that. But as far as like a schedule of reevaluating those things, it would not be in any like short time frame, and it's definitely not one we've looked at this time. Because, for example, we just made these changes, and that covered 100% of the releases there. So, you know, this is not like, oh, we're going to look at this every few weeks. That would be insane. Or even every quarter or something like that. Ideally, these changes, that's it. Because, like, again, with Starks, we had to change one guy, and that was it.
Well, to be clear, right? Like when you're talking about the difference between us looking at something and evaluating it, and and us doing something about it are two very, very different things, right? It is probably, especially to really enfranchised players like yourself, like it's probably clear, but the cycle of iteration is incredibly complex, right? For every possible change we make, we have to evaluate that change, not only in a vacuum, but against every other change made in the same patch against that meta. We have to simulate that meta in our closed environment, which is a big environment, but of course you guys know, right? Our environment will not match the real world by any stretch. So it's tough, right? And of course, we're making a game that is as complex as, not rules complex, but as strategically complex as we can get. That is of course incredibly taxing. So we can theory craft all we want about the changes we want to make, but when we make a change, we never want to have to revert again because we accidentally made something too strong, right? That's the worst case scenario. So evaluation all the time, right? I know this because I listen in and don't say anything in their conversations, but it really does take it takes an explosive event to actually do something about it. And I was super impressed by the fact that we did buffs. Like, I love that idea, but don't get too attached right now.
It's also a matter of the live audience is also playing in a vacuum because
That's right.
they might be talking about something that's like, okay, that might seem the case right now, but literally we're a release or two away from things drastically changing because you're playing with, I guess the best way, a nice way to say is you're constantly playing with incomplete information. So you might this thing doesn't really seem right or doesn't seem good, but then you're just because you're missing that one little key that's going to fall into place there that might be coming out, and all of a sudden it's oh, okay, this is how this works.
Right, and that's the perils of a miniature game release schedule, right? That's never going to change.
Wonderful. One final question then. Will there be hot pie? People ask about this a lot, and we've seen the card, but is that actually going to be coming out?
Yes, 100% confirmed, without a doubt. There will be a guaranteed hot pie card. Lesson number 2, I am not to be trusted in most things I say.
Okay.
I'm still going to count that as a
Guaranteed that's going to get spliced on the internet.
That's mark number 2.
Can we circle back to the long question to give some other people a shot, and then we'll come back to it.
Okay.
All right.
Michael, will you continue to do your podcast? And is there a chance that you might deviate from doing podcasts specifically for the Ramsey Commander?
So
if you're going to talk about the best thing out there, just keep talking about the best thing out there. I actually I am going to do more of those. It's just that I've been traveling a lot lately and left my headset at home, so that's actually what caused that to not happen. So there's that answer. No promises, but yes.
The question was on podcasts, and so next, over on the left.
I really love
wait
the
Mike, thank you.
NCU attachment, and I noticed that on the board, every NCU has when Peter Baelish does something or when you influence, but Roger Cassell's, it says if you claimed X, one enemy common unit becomes vulnerable, and then it says, while influencing unit, then it does its normal stuff. Noticing that that's the only card, and then, as my friend Jon Snow has mentioned with Walder Frey yesterday, something about if you claim it, would that mean that if another person, let's say Caitlin, had the melee tactics board, and then you put Roger Cassell on some other thing, would they get that effect of if you claimed already because you've already claimed it?
Those are actually two different. So Walder Frey and Roderick actually do have two different sets of wordings that are similar but are different. Walder says that while you claim the crown zone, while you're the first player, or if you have claimed the crown zone, and that's referring to you as a player because players control zones, not models. Roderick's one specifically says if you claim the combat zone, and that is referring to his activation at that specific point.
All right. Any other questions? Yes, in the gray shirt.
How happy are you with the current balance of the different factions, and how is it comparing to your playtesting?
Actually pretty happy, and actually we look at tournament statistics. There is no single faction that is... of course, now the Free Folk just came out as well, so they actually are skewed abnormally high because... looking at the Adepticon tournament, for example, they won the event, but there was also two Free Folk players in that event, so statistically half of the Free Folk won the tournament. So that's how that skews. But then you also have the neutral faction, which is not fully fleshed out right now, and that one is technically placing the lowest just because of also amount of play, because, there. But otherwise, if you look at statistics across the boards of factions and performances, there's not a clear these guys are winning the vast majority of tournaments or events. Even back when it was just the Starks versus Lannisters, Starks were technically winning more events at a staggering 56% versus 44% to the Lannisters. So even that was, very lightly skewed in one favor or another there. But so, that tournament data and everything is something we do keep track of, not just for, the competitive play is very important as well, but also keeping casual. But those are two different metas, and people will have different opinions on, what's strong and what's not. It's always a balancing act of, does this feel stronger versus is this actually performing to a level that needs to be looked at stronger? That's like, just not to dwell too much on this, but like initially when we came out with just the starter box, that was almost like whiplash going back and forth between which faction was overpowered compared to the other, with Lannisters or Starks.
Yep.
And that's just the nature of things, and also of course the internet being vocal internet.
And for the record, Starks are better.
Statistically, at the time, Starks were better too. But I mean, no one cares because they're all dead.
Spoiler alert! Oh my God.
20-year-old spoilers.
You mentioned the Karstark Spearmen. I noticed in the Kickstarter, the concept art had the Starks with Spearmen in the art. Is that coming, or was that was that a change that George R.R. Martin had?
The amount of concept art that was made for so we had an actually entire booklet for initial factions of just concept art that was made of just random stuff as basically a proof of design that was submitted of like, hey, we can do Game of Song of Ice and Thrones. So a lot of that artwork kind of trickled out, and then of course the internet latched on and went like, oh my God, confirmed unit. Because actually, like another side story, the initial design of the entire Stark aesthetic changed from what we submitted to what they finalized being. Because we kind of envisioned them originally when we submitted stuff as being this kind of like Viking, Norseman, very thick padding looking armor. And then the feedback we got was Winterfell's apparently not that cold and they would have died of heat stroke. So,
you're talking about the art from David Dow's original book, right?
Yes, the initial stuff.
I still have some of that.
Yeah.
On my desktop.
But so they were just drawing whatever they thought looked cool, and of course we showed some of that during the Kickstarter and then the art book, and that of course turned into confirmed 100% this is coming out and this exists.
All right.
Do you imagine you'll be kickstarting future releases, or will you just have them coming out of the company as they do now?
So we actually did announce during the first Kickstarter that, again, this is a game, is retail. Our focus is retail support for this game and supporting our local stores because this is a lifestyle game, and that grows through local stores. So that was the message we sent out, and that has not changed at this time.
All right. And we probably have time for one or two more questions.
Right. We got one to get back to, right?
Is there a particular card or unit that gave you a lot of trouble designing, or something you can remember going back and forth on a lot and just was much more difficult to balance or get to an agreement on than anything else?
Yeah. I can speak mostly to the core set, right? Because that was the set that I was involved in. We almost never design cards in a vacuum, right? We don't design cards one at a time. It's always the point is to design a deck, right?
And it's actually true of, like, just to note something I wanted to say earlier as well, telling this is actually when it comes to faction design, when that question that I think we actually ignored entirely and glossed over about how we handle like releases and design stuff.
Right. Well, we'll get to that after.
Oh, okay. That was part of Simon's thing?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, then whatever. Yeah. back to this then. So core
right.
stuff.
Well, the coolest part about design, well, coolest for us, but not, is that most of the work that is done in design, you guys will never see, right? It's not just the word on the card. That's the polish, right? It's the tip of the iceberg. Everything else is the groundwork that we do in the end, and the documentations. Do you remember the faction color wheel that we were talking about at the very, very beginning? If we only release X factions, this is what this faction will do. This is what this faction will do. This is what this one, and then we got to do that scenario for 4 or for 5 or for 6. We did that groundwork way at the beginning before we designed a single card, a single unit, so that we would have a grasp of what every faction would be able to do. Because of course, we wanted to make sure that there's design space, there's play space for all the future releases. And then, and of course, every faction is designed by their strengths and their weaknesses, right? So any one individual card is is fine, but it is judged not only in how it fits with every other card in the deck, but in every possible draw combination that you can get, right? I didn't do the math. I mean, on that kind of stuff, I don't do the math. Like, I mean, I just do endless iterations, right? Endless draws to see what every possible hand could look like, both by feel and then by statistics. And that's the design, that's the philosophical side of it. The rest of it is a grind, right? Was any card easy? Like, I don't think did any single card survive from initial draft to what's printed in the core box? I don't think so.
No, because no, not in any like single versions. Either got moved somewhere else, changed around, or
right. Well, because even templating, right? Like, we've scrapped really good designs because we couldn't find a way to template it right, to write it clearly and in English and without jargon. So there's like I won't say it's left on the table, but there's a lot of stuff that was not actually, that was designed, thought of, and just didn't fit, didn't make the cut, right? For whatever reasons, not because it individually wasn't cool, because it didn't fit in with the faction deck in the first place.
All right, one last question here. We're just gonna circle back.
Oh,
I think we've covered a lot of things that I said.
Well, do you want to rephrase the last question?
I can't really remember all the details. I was reading off a big list of questions.
Your question was?
That was the question about how we go about the design process and choosing what we release, and how that's added in.
What is the plan for the release schedule?
Right.
That's it.
So while the release schedule itself is based on a number of variables, such as getting the artwork, the miniatures, the production, all that done, when we get back to the design standpoint, factions are designed as a whole in a go. It's not like we design a starter box for the faction, and then later we'll start touching on some units. We've designed as many units as we plan to release for that faction, at least in what we would call like a Wave 1 style thing, which I'm not going to tell any specific numbers about for each faction or whatnot, but it includes at least a couple hero boxes that we know are going to impact things. So, when you see these things come out, it's not like we just designed this stuff last month and, then we made it in the span of a month and shipped it out and, this thing didn't exist 4 months ago. No. An entire faction is designed. So we know the grand scope of things, and we know how everything fits in that faction, in one go. And that's basically the Wave 1 kind of design there, which includes upwards but not limited to between 6 to 10 unit boxes and 2 hero boxes. Those are soft numbers that are not firmly set in stone. So, but the important thing is, like, when you see a starter box, there's other stuff designed around that faction, not just that starter box. It's not like we made that in a vacuum and now it's like, this would be cool, and just there we go. So that gets back into the whole, when people are mentioning things, they're only seeing part of the overall picture. So just because something does not seem like it has a place yet, it does somewhere. It's just that the other part of that piece might not be out yet. Now, as far as the order and releases of those, again, there's too many variables to talk about there. We can't just go like, oh, we release them 1 through 10 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because we might have an issue where,
even on design, there's a lot of variables to consider, right? Right. So there's a I don't know how much there was this ideal we talked about way in the beginning, and it's an ideal, so they never last, right? But the ideal was that we want to have a little narrative, not necessarily like a mechanical narrative, right? Where you'd have a setup and payoff, and surprise, right? So we want to have a rule of, we're going to give you like X% of fan service, exactly what you expect, and then Y% of a little twist, a little surprise, something that you wouldn't expect, because obviously we don't want to be too predictable, but we also don't want to be too clever and full of ourselves. So that's on the design side, right? And then of course we also have to be CMON is not run by the design department, right? But there are logistics to consider. There's what is producible to consider. There's what approvals are different speeds for different factions. So we have to be agile to a point. So we ended up having to design a release schedule that had vision behind it, but was flexible to a degree. And I know, we've changed it we made at least 2 major changes to our schedule based on externalities. but we accounted for that, right? So nothing's ever goes by a design ideal, but it ends up working.
One of my favorite phrases that I heard from one of the online community was, if you're ever looking at something and you're like, man, I don't get it, that thing might be one attachment or one unit away from just like, oh, okay, this is how this works now. So that's something to keep in mind as well.
Awesome. Wonderful. Well, I think that wraps up our chat today. Thank you all so much for joining us and for coming to CMON Expo. And feel free to continue asking questions on Twitter or Facebook, because we will come back and circle back to some of those there. And have a great show. Thank you all so much for your time.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us today, guys. We really appreciate you hanging out with us, and we do appreciate you staying tuned, even though we had internet problems and everything like that. So we will catch you guys all later.